Welcome to the Grace Fellowship Podcast. We are so excited that you're here listening with us. We hope that today's episode will inspire and equip you to know and follow Jesus.
Hey, I want to welcome you to our Grace Fellowship Podcast. This is a really special day because on this day back in 2003, 23 years ago, on June the 8th, a miracle started called Grace Fellowship. In fact, that was the first Sunday that the church met at Bridgeport High School, began a brand new church, and it has been an amazing 23 years. We've just seen God do miracle after miracle, doing only what he could do. In fact, we've seen thousands of people make decisions to trust and follow Jesus, and we've got to be a part of that. And I think one of the reasons for that is because throughout the history of our church, from the beginning till now, the gospel has remained our primary focus, and we just simply had the privilege of being a part of something that God chose to do, and we got to be a part of it. I do want to read one verse that I put in a book that I read, because this is something that's really important to me about all that's happened here. In Isaiah 42:8, God said of himself, "I am the Lord, that is my name, and I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to idols." So even as we start, Pastor Chris would tell you this, I'm telling you this, that all the honor and all the glory and all the praise for all that's happened at Grace over these 23 years, it all belongs to God. And we're excited about what he continues to do in the life of our church. I'm here with Jim T. Kane and Chad Eubanks. They have actually been here since the very beginning of the church 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be sharing some things with us too, a little bit about what happened in the early times at Grace. And I wrote one thing in the book called Miracle in the Cow Pasture that has been kind of a mainstay throughout the history of our church, and that is simply this, is that prayer has been a key aspect in absolutely everything that we've done from its inception until now. In fact, Jim T., you and your wife Tracy, you guys were a part of those early prayer meetings before Grace Fellowship as a church ever met the first time, just trying to find out what was going on, seeking God. So tell us a little bit about how that happened, how that group of people came to the consensus of starting this church.
Yeah, BJ. It was a fun ride, and looking back on it, have some great memories about that. But back in 2003, back about around February, March of that year, a group of us, about 10 families, just God was stirring our heart to do something new, and we didn't know what it was. And so we, several of our families had been through an Experiencing God Bible study. And so we knew that, hey, we got to seek God and join where he's at work. And so we just started praying. And we met at somebody's house on Tuesday nights there in Bridgeport. And we would have, people about regularly, 10 to 12 people, and but we'd have more. Sometimes we'd have 25 there. Sometimes we'd have 15. But we kept praying. Hey, God, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to know? Show us what you want us to do. And so through that, and it seemed like a long 3 or 4 months we were doing that. Yeah. But again, God just started showing us, revealing to us what he wanted to do. And so in June, we decided, hey, let's just see if we can, let's have a worship service at Bridgeport High School. And so we started sending, you didn't have, technology wasn't real big back in those days.
No.
And so I remember sending out some, we met and we came up with some flyers and sent them out in the mail to people. Yeah. And they came to our Tuesday night prayer gatherings. And so we sent it to them first, and then we put some advertisements in the paper and said, hey, we're going to have this church, a worship service is what we called it, at Bridgeport High School. And so we set up 100 chairs, I think, and we didn't know if we'd have 100 people there. And people started coming, and more people come. So we ended up having to set up, about 185 chairs.
Wow.
That first service, And so we called we didn't have a preacher, and so we called the local seminary there in Fort Worth and said, hey, y'all have somebody who would like to come out and help us lead a worship service. And so they sent a guy out, and then we had some people in our prayer gathering that could sing and lead worship, and so they did that. And so we had our first worship service.
I love it.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
some of the guys, I think some of the guys that were part of the leadership team or some of the people in the church preached whenever you didn't have special guest. Or,
So that we rocked
whatever.
along until you came around without having a pastor.
Yeah.
You know, and so that first sermon, and I got to share this story with you because God confirmed what we were doing by, number one, sending the people. You know, the people that came. That was a confirmation that said, hey, you know, there's other people besides us that want a new work to start. And then the offering, you know, we had a $20,000 offering.
Wow.
You know, and that was pretty amazing, you know, seeing that. And then we didn't have a church name. We didn't have a bank account. You know, we didn't know what to do. And so we just kept meeting on our Tuesday nights and praying, you know. And so, and just seeing what God wanted us to do.
Yeah, I remember because we started talking shortly after that, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I remember that I don't know who it was on the leadership team told me that you had some people that showed up. They wanted to join, and nobody knew how to let somebody join the church. They just you were just trying to get started.
Trying to get started.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So that was all birthed in prayer, though.
Yes. It started with prayer.
And the group came together. I remember somebody said, I think we need to start a new church, and there was an agreement, and the people had gotten that word from God.
Yes.
What you guys didn't know is that at the very same time, 250 miles away, I was praying and asking God what He wanted me to do.
Wow.
And I'd gone through experiencing God also, and so, you know, I was in a great church in the Woodlands. I loved it and was doing well. But I just really felt God was doing something in my spirit, and I wanted to be a lead pastor again and those kinds of things. So I was casually in the month of July, actually, I was looking at a website, and it would list churches without pastors. And I came across this, I think it said something like this, New Church Start Looking for Pastor, Bridgeport, Texas. And it caught my eye because I'm thinking, I'm down on the coast and I'm thinking, Port, it's got to be some new happening area down here on the coast. And I got real excited, you know, and I clicked on it. And then when I found out where it was, I was a little bit surprised. But, you know, when I clicked on that, it sent a deal to you guys and y'all made contact. And as I said, in experiencing God, I learned this a long time ago in experiencing God. It's not really about the location. It's not really about the site. It is God doing something, and does He want you to be a part of it? And that was my question. God, are you wanting to do something here? And do you want me to be a part of it? And I remember you guys, you hollered at me. We had several discussions and talk. Really, to make a long story short, I became somewhat like a consultant to this leadership team for a number of months. They would ask all kinds of questions and things. Several different groups came down to the Woodlands to see our church because they wanted to be like a purpose-driven church and to talk. And I do remember this in those meetings. I felt like God was doing something unique, or He wanted to. And I told him, regardless of what happens, and you know what we talk about. I just want to tell you a couple of things. Pray big, believe big, and ask big. And that's been kind of my mainstay, and it was with them. And then right before Thanksgiving in 2003, it's funny because we talked for all these months, and you guys never asked me, do you want to be the pastor? And so I said, well, I'll just be the consultant and help. And then they finally popped the question and said, hey, would you consider being our pastor? And I said, well, look, I'm fixing to go hunting for a week at my brother-in-law's ranch. And that's a great time for me to pray. I'll pray there. And so I went to the ranch and I did not pray because I was afraid of what God would say. I was scared. I was scared He's going to say, hey, yeah, I want you to go there. And it just, I mean, if you talk about culture change, it was way different than where I was. And another funny thing for me was that we involved our kids in all those kinds of things. Jeremy was in Houston working. Julie was going to A&M. Josh was a junior at the Woodlands High School. And I remember telling them, and asking them to pray. And Julie began to check it out and check out where it was. And I remember one conversation with her. She looked at me and she said, Dad, have you lost your mind? Yeah. You're crazy. You can't do that. And I just told her, I said, no, darling, we have to be wherever God wants us to be. So after Thanksgiving, they said, well, did you pray and get an answer? And I said, well, no, I really didn't get an answer because I didn't really pray like I needed to. I need to come preach, and then we'll know. And so the only time I could be off from that point on was actually the first Sunday in January of 2004. And so Janet and I made the trip up here, preached the message on having positive faith, believing God for big things. And it was a great day. We had a wonderful time. Had what'd you call it? Dinner on the grounds. Got to meet a lot of potluck, not dinner on the ground. It was a potluck. Got to meet a lot of cool people. It was a lot of fun. And then on the way home, there was silence for a while in the car. And I just asked Janet, well, what do you think? She said, well, what do you think? And I told her, I said, I think God's saying we need to be here. And she said, well, I feel the same way. And so you guys called after that week, and I told the leadership team, if you want us, we're willing to come. We don't know what that looks like, what that means. And then so we started. My first Sunday was February the 1st, which was Super Bowl Sunday that year. And we did a big blowout, and it was cool. And we had a ton of people there, and it was fun. The thing that I remember most about that first February, though, is when we first got there, and I'd been talking to the leadership team and said, all right, we need to have a baptism team. And they looked at me like, what is a baptism team? It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. And I said, well, we're going to see, people saved, and we want to be ready and all that. And so we planned, because that year was leap year. We planned to have a leap year baptism on the 29th of February. And so we worked on it, and we did all of our stuff. And I'm telling you, it was incredible, because that was our very first baptism together. And we baptized 28 new believers on that very first baptism. And you were up on the roof at Caker's house.
I was one of the first social media guy, media
with your video camera and other stuff.
Nobody else would crawl up the ladder to get up on top.
Well, you had to, because there were so many people gathered around.
Around the pool.
And I don't think anybody had ever seen that many people baptized at one service. And, for me, this is the deal. What I really believe, I believe God was giving us a picture of what he wanted to do here. And I think he was strengthening our faith for the future. He was saying, that he was going to do something incredible here. One of the people baptized on that leap year baptism was Chad.
Yes.
Pretty incredible. And now you guys are both on staff, and I love that. And I know you don't like speaking in public, and I know you don't really like being on video, so it's a little uncomfortable, right? But I want to thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
So can you tell us just maybe a little bit about your journey, to that point maybe, and from then, and then how you ended up here?
Sure. So both my wife and I grew up in the area, went to high school at Bridgeport, graduated from Bridgeport, went off to college in Denton, got saved in 1998, January 8th, 1998. And Shay, my wife, had been after me about getting baptized and just going public with my faith. And I always just kind of had this belief that I wanted to get baptized at a church that our family was going to be rooted in. And so I just kind of put that off. We moved back to the Bridgeport area in May of 2002. Our oldest son, who turns 24 this summer, he was born in 2002. So between 2002 2003, we're looking for churches. We both went to different churches growing up. We knew we didn't want to attend those churches, so we were looking for something, just a church for our family to start attending. And we heard about Grace Fellowship and started attending. And as you said, from the very beginning, you could just see it was something special. You could see that the people's hearts were in the right place, and it was just really, really special. And so then shortly after you arrived, you started talking about a baptism, and I knew right then that was when I was going to get baptized. And you're correct. There were so many people surrounding the pool, John and Lisa Caker's house, and I believe John was the one that baptized me that day. And just a special moment for me, for my family, and the rest is history. It's been crazy what's been going on here at Grace Fellowship.
It has been crazy.
Yes.
And now you're on staff.
I am. So and so that transformation of just working in the corporate world for 20-something years. And we talked about it here at Grace, just a transformation of your heart and mind. And it was me, even though I was a Christian, I was chasing after things of this world, trying to climb the corporate ladder and seeking increased salary, increased recognition, and just things that had transpired in my life over the years, and being so involved here at Grace Fellowship and our family. We just made a point to always be here on Sundays and be involved, serve, get in a life group. And so we just did those things along the way. And like I said, just transformation of my heart and mind, and went through the Radical Mentoring group in 2018, I believe. Anyway, and then God just slowly started to work on my heart. And because it wasn't that I was disgruntled where I was working, worked at a great company, great benefits, just a great, really, really, really good company. People don't leave that company because their benefits are so good. And I remember driving on 287 South in Rome. The radio was off, just praying, God, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do in my life? And the words, "Have I not told you to be still and listen," popped in my mind. And I knew right then, you and I had a brief conversation prior to that. I knew right then that I was committed to doing that. And so the moment you called, I already knew I was going to say yes, because I had already been told, you're going to do this. And it's just taking a step of faith and trusting God. And He's been great to Grace Fellowship. He's been great to me. He's been great to our family. And it's been a great ride.
I remember in that men's group that Mark and I led, that you were in with several, and we had our story retreat. And I remember after hearing your story, thinking, and we may have talked about it before, but I remember in that retreat, I felt like God put on my heart, Chad needs to be here. And that's kind of, we started a little bit of talking, and then God did this. It's so crazy cool that happened. So just so many incredible things have taken place. And, we were talking about the leap year baptism. It's funny because in the early days, we baptized in horse troughs. We baptized at motel pools. We baptized in hot tubs. We baptized in the public pool. We baptized at the lake. We baptized wherever we could find water and do that. And it was incredible. And one of the verses that's been a mainstay, I think, for our church, and it was for me very early on, is Luke 1:37. It says that nothing will be impossible with God. And that goes back to believing big and praying big and asking big and just believing that. In fact, that first year, we actually had 101 people that were baptized, or the first 11 months of 2000. And what really thrilled my heart, just like it was with Chad, the majority of the people that were baptized that year were men. And I think that, again, spoke to what God was doing in this place. And so we were growing so rapidly, we started looking for land. And Bucky and Dana Monishagan got Janet and I a dinner. We all had dinner together with James and Shirley Wood because we had looked everywhere and couldn't find land. And that night I shared our vision of what we wanted to do with James and Shirley, and they loved the vision. And I told him, I said, James, we need 30 to 50 acres. And he said, I've got 30 acres I'll sell you in Paradise. And he made us a deal that we just could not turn down. I mean, it was too good to be true. We were excited. And so that's the land that we're on now. We need more, by the way, but we're on that land now. And so we moved actually from meeting in Bridgeport High School in June of 2005 to Paradise High School, because this is where we're going to be located. And we had a big deal called Summer in Paradise, which was great. And then because we had the land, we knew we wanted to build, and we did our first spiritual growth campaign, which included, giving and learning to give and live as God desires. And again, God provided miraculous ways. I mean, He just has. I remember the night that we shared the vision for our buildings, the first building that we were going to build, which is this one. It's changed a whole lot in those years. But as we shared that vision, people were so excited and all that. And there was a couple in our church that I had lunch with, didn't really know that well. They were fairly new, but they loved what they saw, especially in our children's ministry with all these kids everywhere. And Janet and I we were at the Decatur Civic Center. We were standing there talking to different people, and they walked up and said, hey, we want to help you get this thing started because we believe God's in it. We're going to prime the pump. And he said, so we're going to give you $1 million. And I just almost fell over. And I tried not to react weird. I didn't know. In fact, they walked off after a few minutes, and I looked at Janet and said, was I hearing things, or did they really say that? And they did that. But they didn't just do it. It's so incredible. We kind of have a deal called equal gifts, not equal gifts. Equal gifts, not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice was our phrase. So we wanted everybody, and everybody did. Kids did, children did, students did, adults did, and our little old 3-year-old church raised enough money to where the banks would actually talk to us, and we moved into our first building. We began building and moved into the first building in March, this building of 2007. What was interesting for me there, too, this is just a side note, we had 360 people who made decisions to trust and follow Jesus in 2007. So it was just like this banner year for us. And so, by the way, just kind of a side note, there may be some of you watching this podcast right now, and God's putting it on your heart to invest in the kingdom by giving a sizable gift of grace. Anyhow, I'm just throwing that out there. If you got $1 million, we'd love to have that, okay? And reach more people for Christ. Prayer, as I said, had been a big note. One of my favorite personalities over the years, which you both knew well, is a lady named Rosie Vaught. Rosie was already in her 90s when I got here. She passed away, I think, just 3 months before her 100th birthday. But Rosie prayed for 50 years without stopping for a church like Grace to be birthed in Wise County, to start in Wise County. And her prayers are still being answered today as lives are being changed. She would have a front row seat at every baptism. In fact, that first leap year baptism, you can see her in a chair right on the front row. Yeah. She also sat right on the front row in our worship services, which shocked me because the music's loud. Most old people don't, but she couldn't hear, so it didn't really matter. So she was fine. But I remember there's so many stories that I have of Rosie that just blew me away. We'd heard she got sick. And she lived over here in Bridgeport. And usually when you pull up at her house, she had like one of those glass doors on the front. And she had a little chair and a table and a light there. Anytime I went to see her, she was sitting there with her Bible in her lap where she'd been reading the Bible and praying. And she'd look outside once in a while. We heard that she was sick, not doing well. So I took one of our pastors to go check on her and visit her. And we got there and the wooden door was shut. And she wasn't sitting, at the deal. And so we knocked and rang the doorbell, and nothing happened. So I opened the glass door and checked it was unlocked. So I opened it, no Rosie there. And so we're hollering, Miss Rosie, Miss Rosie. No answer. And of course, we're beginning to think, oh no, something terrible has happened, And I'd not ever been past the living room in her house. So the other pastor and I, we went down the hall, and as we got to the first bedroom on the right of the first door is a bedroom, I looked in, and there Rosie was, laying on the bed like this, and it didn't look like she was breathing. I thought, oh, no, she's died. I can't already stand it. And about the time I was going to say her name, in fact, I think I said her name. She didn't move. The other guy flipped on the light, and when he did, she sat straight up in the bed. And it scared her, and I thought we had a resurrection. I'm telling you, it scared me to death. She was startled. I was startled. It was crazy. We got our composure, and she kind of moved over, and she was doing okay, and and then she looked at me very seriously, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, we came to check on you. I don't need you to check on me. There are other people that can do that." She said, "You have more important things to do because there are many people in our community that need to know Jesus, and that's your business." And at that point, what I understood about Rosie as a senior adult was simply this: she got it. She got what we were about. She didn't need us to come check on her. She wanted people to come to know Jesus. And so it was just, it was incredible. what happened there. But here's what I want to do. I want to fast forward several years. I could tell you all kinds of stories, but let me fast forward quite a few years. About 5 years before we made a transition, when we brought Pastor Chris on to be our teaching pastor, God had already put that on my heart to make a transition. And listen, I love serving as lead pastor of this church. It's one of the greatest joys of my life. But here's what I knew in my heart and what God put on my heart. While I still have incredible passion, I didn't really believe that I had the emotional energy to take us to the next level, because I really believe this is going to be a regional church. Many, many years ago, God put it on my heart, this is going to be a big, big, big church. And so we needed somebody with more emotional energy in that. And so I just knew that we needed a new lead pastor. And the dates that I felt like God gave, somewhere around 2021 or 2022. So we started looking and praying. And the idea was to bring on a teaching pastor. He'd be here for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then he would take over the role as the lead pastor, and I would step down. And actually back in 2013 is when I started talking to Chris. He was in Odessa, and about coming here as our lead pastor. And I bugged him over it because God put it on my heart again. I believe he was the man. And one of the guys that I trust implicitly in our church, who is a prayer warrior, had also told me, I believe he's supposed to be the next pastor. And so that was in our hearts, but Chris was busy at Crossroads, had a thriving student ministry, and it just wasn't time. It wasn't God's time, and he kept saying no. And finally, I just told him, look, I'm just going to quit asking. I'm not going to bother you anymore unless God changes your heart. And we began to look at other guys. We looked at quite a few and brought some in and all that, and they were great, but we just didn't think, they were the right fit. And then in 2018, Labor Day weekend, we went up to Odessa. Chris was preaching that weekend, but he had told me about a pastor on their staff that he thought might be a good fit for us. And so I went up to interview that pastor, and Chris and I were having, I think Saturday morning, we went and had coffee, and we were sitting there in the conversation. And in the middle of that conversation, he looked at me and he said, I'm jealous. And I said, what do you mean you're jealous? What are you jealous of? He said he was jealous of Daniel, the guy I was going to talk to. Why are you jealous of him? Because he might go to Grace instead of me. And I thought, what? You're really thinking about that? And he said, well, I don't know, but maybe so. And then following that, we had another conversation. He said, look, I think God is doing something in me and changing what Julie and I are supposed to do so we can at least explore the opportunity about coming to Grace. And so we began to explore that. We began to look at that and, think about what might happen there. Our ministry leadership team spent a lot of time praying over this, and we began that process of doing interviews and stuff. And then in 2018, God confirmed the move, and Chris and Julie and the boys moved back to Grace as our teaching pastor. And I went ahead and told him, and I said, look, we'll make the transition to you as a lead pastor by somewhere around 2021. And here's the deal again. I could tell you, I got a million stories I could tell you about the past. And I believe that Scripture is very clear. I think we're to remember and share what God's done. And we're especially to share that with the next generation, the things that build faith. That's very important, that we never forget our foundation and the things that God has done. But I also know that Scripture is clear, and Paul was very clear that he learned from the past, but he was very focused on the future. And what God wanted him to do in the future to reach the next generation. In fact, I used to have a poster outside my office in the hallway that said, when your memories exceed your dreams, the end is near. And far too often, I think we get on the good old days and on the memories and all that. But man, I got incredible dreams. And the thing that I loved about Chris is that he has incredible dreams, and our staff does too. And so while I have tons of memories, I'm more excited about the future of Grace than I am about the memories. I really am. And I'm very excited. I say this often anytime I have a chance to preach. I'm so excited about the leadership that Chris has given to our church family, and we have an awesome staff. Okay, Jim T, Chad, and in fact, let me ask you. I'm talking all the time and not giving you a chance to say anything else. So, Chad, you and Shay came and you were baptized and you were here and you were working at the other company, and you're on staff. Why did y'all stay? Why did you stay at Grace all these years?
I think we talk about it a lot is it's the heart. You see the heart of Jesus and the interaction with everybody within the church, and that's the foundation. That was there in 2003. It was there in 2006. It's been there this entire time, and it's still there today. And Grace Fellowship has a lot of generous people within the church. And yes, the people that walk through the doors has changed over the years, and it's changed drastically in the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
But that heart and that generosity still exists today. And once you see it, why would you run from it?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you dive deeper into it and get more involved? And so that's been our approach over the years, and will continue to be that.
We did Uncharted,
Yes.
both, I guess, 2 different deals with Uncharted, and was blown away by the generosity of our people.
In my position, I see it on a daily basis and on a weekly basis. And not to get into all the details, but when I say we have really generous people, we have generous people. And the faith is there that people are going to continue to give. They're going to give of their time. They're going to give of their resources. And you see that day after day, week after week, year after year. And to me, when I think of Grace Fellowship, that's what I think about. I think about people are friendly, people have a heart for Jesus, and people are really, really generous. And we wanted to raise our family up in that type of environment, and we wanted our kids to hear the truth, and we made certain sacrifices along the way and certain decisions, and we had to say no to certain things, and it's okay to say no to certain things. We always wanted to put Jesus first, and I feel like as a family we've done that.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I think I asked actually before I came here not to see what people gave, but I wanted to see kind of a list of people that were giving regular, and this is way back.
Right.
Because I'd been in a previous church where one person gave a whole lot and not many other people gave, and that's a day. But it was just widespread. Again, it was not equal gifts; it was equal size. There are a lot of people that are part of giving and serving and all that. And then Jim T, because you were a coach, you left.
My coaching career took me to out West Texas.
Yeah, and then so, you came. You were also an administrator to school and all that. But when y'all moved back to the area, what brought you back to Grace?
Yeah. So it's just like what Chad said. it's the heart of the people, the love of Jesus. You can see Jesus here, feel Jesus here.
Yeah,
it was a community, and knew that this is where we wanted to be. If we had a chance to move back to the area, and we did have a chance to move back to the area. And as soon as we were able to move back to this area, without a doubt, we came to Grace Fellowship. Because we wanted to come and serve and get plugged in and do community. With the people here, and we loved what Grace Fellowship was doing with the next generation.
Yes.
Being a coach and being around kids, that was important. And so anyway, Grace Fellowship did that, and so we came back and jumped right in and was able to help with that.
I think that and then you made a transition from
yes, and so that
to being
was
a small groups pastor.
Yeah. So that it came out of left field. Had no, that wasn't. But coming, you had started our prayer gatherings on Tuesday night. We had started, coming up here and praying on Tuesday night with a group of people, and so through that, and then talking with you and Rocky, and they said, well, hey. What are you going to do when you retire? I hadn't even really thought about retirement, and I said, well, I'm probably going to do what all old coaches do, probably just go drive a bus, and so anyway, so it just one thing after much prayer and talking, and groups, community was very important to us. It had always been part of small groups since we started Grace Fellowship. We had some small groups back in the day.
Yes.
And because that's really, you want to do life with people. And so anyway, so that was Tracy and I both loved that and wanted to be a part of that and saying, okay, let's go do that. And so really didn't know what I was doing, but through prayer and through just listening and learning and watching, let's go do it. And so we did that.
It's to me again. It just speaks again to the way God moves and what He does in our lives. And I know your passion for groups, Janet and I have been in groups as long as I can remember. That's where I think many times real life change takes place, just like it did with your, And so for me, even leading, it's always a great challenge. I love my men's group and the other groups we're in. And you were talking about the next generation. This is one. People ask me, when you walk around, what do you think? I walk around here on Sundays and I've got a smile on my face and joy in my heart, because I see just hundreds and hundreds of students and children. And I was asking about this morning. We have right at 800 kindergartners through high schoolers that have already signed up for camp this summer, which to me that's just because they're going to hear about Jesus. They're going to be pointed in the right direction. That's an investment in the next generation, and I absolutely love it. And then baptisms, they've always been special. They grab my heart. I think May the 31st was our last one about a week or two ago. We baptized 28 new believers. This year already, 148 people have gone public with their faith, and we're not even halfway through the year, which is just incredible to me. And so I think, again, the reason for that is the heart of this church, the heart of our leader, Pastor Chris, and our staff. A phrase that we've used for years here is we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing, he says it in our mission statement, is that we exist to inspire and equip people to know and follow Jesus. That's what's we love having the big crowds. It's incredible. 4 services, packed out services and several of them, and extra auditorium and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that thrills our hearts the most, and I know it thrills Chris's, is when people go public with their faith through baptism and take that step. And so for me, again, I got incredible memories that I could share forever. But the future to me of this church is incredibly bright. I think we haven't even begun to see all that God is going to do. And so if you guys had one last thing, I know I didn't tell you we're going to ask this, but if you had one last thing you wanted to say to people on this podcast, what would it be? Just any short little anything.
I'd like to say this, that, community, again, God didn't put us here to do this life by ourselves.
Right.
We need each other, and get plugged in. Our church is, big in numbers, but the way you really get to know Jesus and follow Jesus and do life with other people, find you a community, and there's plenty of communities out here that we have opportunities to get part of. So that's what I would say.
As we grow bigger, we still need to grow smaller in terms of the group.
Yes,
I mean, we
sir.
need to be in a group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
I would say just very simple. Just say yes. If you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus, say yes.
Yeah.
If you're a new believer, say yes to serving. Say yes to getting in a life group. Just say yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you say yes, he's going to get you out of your comfort zone, and that's where you grow
Like
the
today?
most.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
today. And that's
faith.
where you grow the most.
Yeah.
I mean, I said yes to coming on staff, and that if you would have asked me that 15 years ago, I would have said no way. But I feel like since I've been on staff, that's where I've grown the most in the last, it's going to be 7 years this year.
Yeah.
So I would just say yes.
Good.
Great words. Great words.
Yep.
I think my words would be very simple as, we want to build God's kingdom as we build his church. So I just hope that we'll continue as a church family to serve big, to give big, to love big, to pray big, to believe big, and to ask big. Because again, as Luke 1:37 says, nothing is impossible with God. So, hey, thanks for joining us for this podcast. We hope you have an incredibly blessed day. Thank you, Jim T.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate you guys being a part of this. And you guys have a blessed day.